so that both of us can have dinner at a timely time.
Timely? Us? Timely? Welcome to Story Sirens, the podcast where we deep dive into our favorite myths, legends, and stories from around the world. I'm Yenny.
And I'm Sarah. And today we are wandering into the woods.
I feel like that's a title of a Taylor Swift song. Am I right or am I not right?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I feel like I should fact check this with some of my friends who are diehard Swifties.
Yeah, because I'm not a diehard Swiftie, but I feel like there was something into the woods. Well,
there was folklore. There was folklore, and there was Evermore, and they're both sort of like bluegrassy, woodsy themed.
Oh, girl, you know more than me.
Into the Woods is a musical.
Oh, I was close.
About fairy tale characters.
Oh, there you go. Even better.
Yep. All right. Well, let me just say right here in the beginning, fairy tales, not for children. At least, they're not exclusively for children. You know, when we're talking about them today, we're like, oh, yes, so that, you know, our little girls can be in princess dresses and little boys can pretend that they're knights in shining armor. Listen, fairy tales, when they originated, when they got their start, were often entertainment for adults as they worked at their spinning, cooking, laundry, labor, what have you.
I mean, quite frankly, in 2025, they are still entertaining us the same exact way. I'm literally listening to the Throne of Glass series while doing chores. I only listen to, like, audiobooks while doing chores.
Yeah. I'm literally right now listening to, Blackwoods Blue Sky, which is about this woman in Alaska who meets a man who can turn into a bear. I mean...
that goes
fairy tales
with today's episode, Sarah.
You know, it kind of does.
There you go.
Often in these fairy tales, children are the most regular occurring protagonists because, after all, what is more sympathetic than a child?
A puppy.
How many... Oh, okay. That is true. But we're just going to stick with the children. Because how many of us don't still view ourselves occasionally as lost children in the woods? That these stories could often be told in front of children was merely a bonus. But the fairy tale as a whole was a story that A, contained magical elements, B, sometimes had a moral, and C, was frequently entertaining, occasionally educational, and most often reinforced an ideal behavior or outcome. Now today, we're excited because we are covering our first Grimm fairy tale. Why is this a big deal, you ask?
Sarah, our listeners are really not asking that. They're listening to this podcast, for goodness sakes. They know that they're going to get something. Come on now.
Okay, fine. But I needed a segue for some history.
Aye. But I thought we were getting history at the end of this story.
Okay, fine. Let me sum it up. Yenny and I are excited about today's episode because it's our first Grimm fairy tale.
You already said that.
And everyone gets excited about Grimm fairy tales because they are always darker than the versions we've all grown up with in the 20th and 21st century.
Ooh, say that 2 times.
Right? Disney has taken several Grimm fairy tales and turned them into wonderful classic family movies. And don't get me wrong, they're great. I am a sucker for many of these films. But in Disney movies, deaths happen off camera, there's usually no real violence, and everything ends with a neat and tidy, happily ever after bow.
Although, I will say, we did get the crazy twist in the first ever Frozen when the guy that we thought Anna was going to end up with was like, nobody loves you, and everybody in that theater went, bitch.
That's emotional violence.
That was
right
emotional.
There.
That was emotional. I will say, they done got us in that one.
But the original Grimm brother fairy tales are always a bit more heavy-handed with the moral, always serve up a bit of extra suffering, always raise the stakes before happily ever after, and sometimes the happy ever after isn't quite that happy.
It usually never is.
True. And for context,
Uh-huh.
The brothers Grimm, or Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, were historians from Germany who lived from the late 1700s to the mid-1800s, 1785 to 1863 and 1786 to 1859, respectively.
Sarah, come on now. I don't think they needed to know that.
And we have them to thank for stories like Cinderella, The Frog Prince, Little Red Riding Hood, Sleeping Beauty, and today's story, which features a certain snowy white character and maybe a dwarf. And And while you may be expecting evil queens, poisoned apples, and enchanted mirrors, I must tell you that we are not discussing that particular Snow White.
Wait, there's more than one?
The fact that there is confusion may be due to the fact that there was a bit of a mistranslation into the English language. In Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, the name Snow White in German was Schneewittchen, and Snow White and Rose Red, today's story, the name Snow White was called Schneewittchen. There is a difference between High and Low German here, and as an English speaker, I cannot fully fathom or explain it.
But I can completely understand this because in Cantonese, it's all about phonetics. With 6 different tones, I still get headaches trying to fully understand what my in-laws say, but most of the time I do. I completely understand what they're saying, but sometimes I get the words mixed up because they sound the same, but they're not. One is a little bit higher, the other one's a little bit lower.
They'll have like an upward accent, a dipping accent, like a little scoop accent, like it's...
Yeah. A
lot of respect, because that's a lot for my brain. So, without any further ado, today we are covering the tale of Snow White and Rose Red, 2 characters who are completely separate from the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs fairy tale. So since there may be some confusion concerning the 2 fairy tales, let's jump in and tell the story of Snow White and Rose Red.
My body is ready.
Let's do it. Once upon a time, there was a widow who lived deep in the woods. In front of her cottage grew 2 rose bushes, one that bloomed beautiful white roses and one that bloomed luscious red roses. The rose bushes were quite similar to the woman's 2 daughters, beautiful and distinctly unique from one another. One daughter was named Snow White, and she was shy, quiet, preferring to read and sew and spend her time in the house. The other daughter was named Rose Red, and she loved to be outside and explore and find adventures. But despite their differences, the 2 sisters were very close and loved each other and their mother. Their mother often remarked that if one daughter had something, she immediately and happily shared it with her sister. The 3 lived happily in their little home in the woods.
Aw, I will say this does remind me of my sister and I. Even though we're 6 years apart, we do love sharing things together. Anywho, I can already tell this. There's going to be dark and sinister things about it. But it was really nice. It reminded me of my sister until then.
It really is. Now, the little girls would often explore the woods surrounding their home, looking for berries and mushrooms and flowers. The woods were safe for the girls to wander through because no animal ever tried to harm them. In fact, the girls were so trusted by the animals of the woods that the deer would let the girls pet them and the rabbits would eat cabbage leaves straight from their hands.
Aww.
The only time they came near to danger was when they had stayed out very late in the night, and since it was dark, they decided to sleep for the night in the soft grasses of the forest. When they awoke at dawn, they found that they had unknowingly fallen asleep near the edge of a cliff. However, rather than falling to their death during the night, they saw a shining white and gold figure blocking them from the edge of the cliff. Their guardian angel had made sure the forest remained a safe place for the girls, even as they slept. Now, one dark day in the middle of a very cold and very bitter winter, the girls sat near the fire playing games with each other, a white dove resting near one girl, a little lamb near the other. The house was locked up for the night, but suddenly there was a knock on the door. The mother answered the door, thinking it was a poor lost traveler. Standing on their front step was a very large bear. The mother and her daughters were terrified, and the lamb and dove hid themselves. But the bear spoke and told them that he meant them no harm. He only wanted to lay down by the fire for a little bit. The winter was so terrible he couldn't keep warm.
I mean, seems like a fair reason to barge in to a, cottage which only has women and little animals.
Right?
Makes sense.
So the trio let the bear into their home, and as he dozed by the fire, Snow White and Rose Red combed all the clumps of snow out of his fur, which, having combed snow out of, my dog's fur, that's an ordeal.
I don't even know, and I'm not ready for it.
Now, he turned out to be a very friendly bear, and he played with the girls by the fireplace. He was such a gentle bear that the dove and lamb slept peacefully in his presence while the girls played. The mother told him he could spend the night and sleep by the fire any time he wanted.
Aww.
The bear thanked her, and the mother took her daughters up to their beds to tuck them in for the night. Every evening for the rest of the winter, the bear would come and warm himself by the fire. He never asked for food or anything else, but instead would sleep while the girls read their storybooks to him and played with his fur. He didn't even mind when they sat on the floor and leaned against him as they practiced their sewing. He mostly didn't mind when they tried to roughhouse with him, rolling him onto his back or climbing up on top of him. When they were too rough, he said,
"Dear girls, let me be. You will beat your suitor to death." Wait, what? Suitor?
So anyway, when spring came... When spring came and the days were warm, the bear told the little family that he was leaving and would not be back. When the girls began to cry at this news, he told them not to be sad. He had to go and guard his treasure from a wicked dwarf. The winter had frozen the ground, and the dwarf had not been able to dig out of his earthen burrow to look for treasure. But now that the spring sun was shining, the bear knew the dwarf would be hunting for riches. Snow White was very distressed that he would not be returning, but she held the door open for him, and she and Rose Red waved farewell to their friend. As the bear passed by the door, a tuft of his fur caught on the door's bolt, and for a brief moment, Snow White thought she saw shining gold under his pelt. Realizing what a silly thought this was, she shook her head and figured it was simply a trick of the light.
Real quick fun fact, did you know that natural pigments of a bear's skin affects the color of their fur?
Oh, does it?
Yeah, so I'm unsure how a golden bear is brown, but I mean, folklore logic. Yeah.
Yep. So, just
I'm
as
still
he
not
said,
over the suitor thing. I don't know what's going on, but I don't like it.
I know. So as the bear said, he did not return, and the girls missed their friend terribly. To distract the girls, their mother sent them to the woods to gather firewood. As the girls wandered the woods, they heard a strange noise and looked for the source of the sound. Beside a felled tree was a dwarf who was jumping and cursing angrily, his 3-foot-long white beard caught in a crevice of the tree. The girls giggled at this sight, and the dwarf heard them and began to yell at them for their rude behavior, insisting that they help free him. The girls each took hold of his beard and pulled, but they couldn't free it from the tree. When Rose Red offered to go get some help for them, the dwarf griped even more, stating, "2 humans is already too many in my presence. I won't hear of being forced to be around another one of you lumbering oafs. Can't you silly children not think of a better solution?" Is that satisfactory?
I love it. It's so satisfactory. I'm impressed.
Lucky for him, Snow White did know of a better solution. She pulled her scissors from her apron pocket and cut off the very bottom portion of his beard where it was stuck in the tree. The dwarf stumbled back, looked at his trimmed beard, and began to yell at the girls. "How dare you cut my beautiful beard? This was the best you 2 babies could come up with? Curses on you and your unending rudeness." Then the dwarf gathered his bag, which the girls saw was full of gold, and ran away.
I feel like the dwarf and my grandmother are one and the same. And then hearing you just put it all together for me.
Days later, the girls went to the nearby river to fish for their family dinner. Near the banks of the river...
Wait a second. Wait a second. ¿Y qué hace la mamá? What does the mom do here? The mom tells her... The mom tells her? The mom goes, "You need to go get the firewood. And now the girls have to also grab the fish for the family." What does she do?
I don't know. You only told me to do the dwarf voice, not to figure out what mom's doing.
I'm very upset. I need to call, what is it? The Florida Department of Children and Families.
Yeah, we need some CPS to come in here.
Because Snow White and Rose Red are from Florida.
They're from Florida, obviously. That's why they're not afraid of approaching strangers. They're like, "We got this. We can handle this. This is fine."
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, the girls go to the river. We're not worrying about mom right now. Near the banks of the river, they heard another commotion and saw the reeds of the water shaking violently. When they approached, they saw the same dwarf again in another terrible situation.
"Oh no, Mr. Dwarf. What has happened to you?"
asked Rose Red. The dwarf, clinging to the reeds for dear life, looked up at the girls and groaned. "Not you two again! As if this day couldn't get worse. I was fishing, and the line tangled in my beard right as a great fish swallowed my hook, and now he wants to eat me!" And sure enough, the girls saw a giant fish eating up all the fishing line and pulling the dwarf towards the water where he would surely drown. The two girls grabbed hold of the dwarf and tried to untangle his beard. They tried to open the mouth of the fish, who had eaten the line up to the tangled tip of the beard. But the fish was too strong and shook their hands free. So Snow White pulled out her scissors again and began to trim the fishing line free of the beard.
Where does she have this scissor?
Just in her apron pocket, because, I mean, don't you go out into the woods with an apron and scissors?
No, I do not.
Isn't that what everybody does? With an apron and scissors in the pocket?
I let you get away with saying in Florida, you say hi to strangers. In Miami, you don't say hi to strangers. In Miami, they look at you and you go, what?
You're like, take a photo. It'll last longer.
Exactly.
Come on. So Snow White pulled out the magical scissors and began to trim the fishing line free from the beard. When the fish swam away, the wet and bedraggled dwarf hauled himself from the river and looked at his poor beard. "Again? It wasn't bad enough that you cut off the end of my beard. Now you've gone higher up. I'll be the laughingstock of my people. You uncivilized toadstools! I curse you to always have holes in the soles of your shoes." Then he grabbed a bag of pearls he had left on the shore and ran away to his burrow.
It is definitely my grandmother. It's definitely my grandmother.
Also, uncivilized toadstools might be my new favorite insult ever.
That's it. This is what we're using. Oh my God. Hashtag uncivilized toadstools.
Hashtag uncivilized toadstools.
We have to use this from now on. We have to remember.
Merch. This is absolutely, yes.
Merch.
Now, sometime later, the girl's mother sent them to town to buy needles and thread and other necessities. Yenny is freaking out over here.
What does she do? I'm getting red because... What the fuck does the mom do? She don't even cook for them because the girls are... Like, I'm crying.
Okay. As the girls entered the open meadow that led into town, they saw a bird flying in circles over a cluster of rocks in the meadow, slowly swooping lower and lower. Just as he was about to touch the earth, they heard a terrible cry of fear. The girls ran towards the cluster of rocks and saw the same dwarf was trapped there by the bird of prey. Just as they saw him, the bird swooped down and grabbed him. He cried out in fear and pain, and the girls jumped to his rescue. They each grabbed one of his little hands and pulled, yelling at the bird to let go. The bird tired of the struggle and released the dwarf, and the dwarf and the girls fell to the ground with a thud. The dwarf stood up, brushed himself off, and then began to yell at the girls. "You clumsy fools! Couldn't you have been more careful about that? My nice coat is all full of holes, and where there are no holes, you have stretched it from all your incessant pulling." Still muttering curses, the dwarf gathered the bag of gemstones that he had dropped and ran back towards the woods and his burrow. The girls were used to his mistreatment of them, and they simply shrugged and walked on to town.
Maybe this dwarf is like grumpy, right? Because there is grumpy in the actual Snow White and the Seven Dwarves.
Yes.
But like, maybe we should give, grumpy dwarf some calming tea. Maybe some CBD. I don't know.
All this rage cannot be good for his blood pressure.
No, at all.
Here in a little bit, I think we're going to discover he's not the same dwarf from Snow White and the Seven Dwarves.
Oh. Okay.
So, here's why.
Okay.
After the girls had finished purchasing their goods in town, they hurried back to their home. But as they entered the woods, they saw a sunny patch, all alight with brilliant colors. When they looked closer, they saw the dwarf, who thought he was alone. He had dumped out the precious jewels onto the ground and was examining them closely. The girls were dazzled by the beautiful sparkles, and when the dwarf saw them, his face turned red with fury. "Stay back, you greedy things! These are mine! You can't have them!" I see Yenny's laughing, and I'm turning red now. I'm a little embarrassed.
This is us with like our like prized possessions. I feel like we turn into the dwarves. These are mine. You can't have them.
No. There are many like
Get
it,
away.
But this one is mine.
But this one is mine. I don't even know. I think that's us like doing our vegetables and then we grow them and then people want one and we're like, no.
Yes. Right. I grew these with my
They're
own
mine.
blood and sweat and tears. Do you know how many bottles of soap I went through to get the dirt out from under my nails? It's terrible. All right. So, a low rumble in the forest. Then there was a great growl. Then a large bear appeared through the trees and stood before the dwarf, snarling at it. The dwarf began to tremble all over. Oh, Mr. Bear, please don't eat me. I'm so small you wouldn't even feel me in your teeth. Why don't you eat these two girls here? They're plump and young and tender. And if you don't eat me, I'll give you all the jewels here. You can have them, all of them. But before the dwarf could continue with his bribe, the bear swiped his paw and killed the dwarf instantly.
Oh my God.
There's
What?
the violence. Yes.
Also, though, I'm like really happy to see you be a dwarf. I think you were made for this role.
I think so too. I personally identify with like the little goblins and gremlins and dwarves.
Yeah,
So.
you're doing it. I even see you with your hands. You're like, so.
The girls were horribly frightened by this whole ordeal, naturally, and had hidden themselves behind a tree when they heard a familiar voice calling out to them.
Snow White, Rose Red, come out, dears. There's no need to be afraid. I know.
I know.
Who am
When
I?
they came out from behind the tree, they realized it was their bear. And even stranger, he took off his bearskin coat and transformed into a handsome young prince, dressed in glowing gold.
I'm the son of a king, naturally. Of course he is. Oh, dude. That dwarf had cursed me to spend all my days as a bear and stole my treasures. My curse could only be broken by his death.
The girls took the prince to their mother, and she could hardly believe her eyes. And in turn, the prince took the trio to his castle to reward their kindness to him. And there he was reunited with his family. Eventually, the prince married Snow White, and his brother married Rose Red. And they had the girl's mother moved into the palace permanently.
Wait,
She brought...
were they not little girls?
Yeah, that is a whole part of the story.
Oh my God, this is, what is that one that we did? The Nutcracker all
Nutcracker.
over again.
Yes.
Oh my God, es que estas cosas me tienen mal. Ay, yo no
Just a
puedo,
little
si
bit,
no es
just
la
a little-
mamá.
I know it's bad. Hold on.
Ay, por Dios.
But the mother brought with her the two rose bushes and planted them outside her castle window.
Oh, well, look at
where
that.
every
She does
year they grew
something.
more and more roses, one set white and one set red. And they lived happily ever after. The end.
Would you look? She does something.
She
planted bushes. She planted bushes. My God, what a story. And why is it? So the whole point was to kill the dwarf.
Yeah.
Ay, Dios mío.
This
is something else.
So, cool story, right? You know.
No.
Well, maybe there's more to it than meets the eye.
There has to be because I'm feeling things.
Okay. So I don't know if this is going to help, but here's a little bit more information that we know about this story.
Yes, the history part.
So this tale first appeared in one of the Grimm brothers' collections in 1827, but it is heavily inspired by an 1816 story. Educator and writer Caroline Stahl penned the appropriately named tale, The Ungrateful Dwarf, and the Grimm brothers added a few twists. In 1837, Germany was ruled by France, and there was a very real threat that much of Germany's culture would be devoured and lost. The brothers were, first and foremost, historians, and they had a passion for preserving their national history and folklore. Now, the brothers, like the sisters of our story, were dedicated workers and were always very close with one another. Like the sisters, they had grown up in a forest cottage with their widowed mother. Some historians argue that the story of Snow White and Rose Red is autobiographical of the brothers, even though there are clear inspirations from Stahl's earlier writing. But a key element that points to Snow White and Rose Red being autobiographical is that the fairy tale makes a point to distinguish the girls at the very start of the story. Snow White is shy and introverted, Rose Red is bold and extroverted. Yet, this never comes into play again for the rest of the story. Throughout the story, the girls are together and act as one. Is this a strange, forgotten edit by the authors, or an intended reflection of the authors, showing no matter the personalities, people can love and respect each other and maintain friendship?
Wow, that's deep. And also, I'd like to believe so as well.
Same. Now, what other story elements make Snow White and Rose Red a unique tale? Tragically, it's not the child bride aspect. Like, that's in a lot of fairy tales, and I can't really help with that.
Or like the absent mother who just makes them do everything. God.
Well, here are a few details that differentiate this story from other fairy tales of their time. The siblings, as previously established, are friendly towards each other. One is not wicked, cruel, or treacherous. They are both loving and caring girls.
The girls are also consistently obedient to their mother, which they shouldn't be. They should go directly to an adult and be like, my mother, this is child labor. But anywho.
The bear acts like a gentleman and not a beast.
A hottie hot gentleman, might I add. Except, no, you know what? I don't know how I feel about that anymore. Because I don't know how old Snow White is.
All I can say is there is a reason I added the word eventually. Snow White and the prince got married. I will say that word's not usually in the fairy tale, but I'm just over here like, they could have just had a close friendship for a long time, and then, when they were both of age, romantic. Let me have this. Let me have this. You asked for a lot of things in this podcast, okay?
You're fair. All right, everyone with the exception of the very obvious villain, aka the dwarf, has a very happy ending. And honestly, if anything, the dwarf also has a happy ending because he no longer has to suffer with his anger management.
With his anger management and his poor beard grooming management. I mean, come on, put that in a hairnet or something. His blood pressure is definitely suffering. But yes, if you are familiar with Grimm's fairy tales or classic fairy tales, even happy, sweet, kind characters often meet terrible ends in these stories. But all the good characters have a happy ending.
Yeah.
3 of the 5 main characters are women who are not looking to improve their stations. They're happy where they are. They are not damsels in distress, and they have control over much of their own story.
And finally, the girls are encouraged to roam the forest by themselves, which is crazy.
I'd like to add that this is unheard of in most fairy tales, especially Grimm stories, as well as it's kind of unheard of in real life.
Yeah. And call Florida's Department of Children and Family on that woman.
Exactly. Think of all the times that a child has been lost in the woods that's made national headlines, and they're sending out search parties. Wait. What?
Do you remember that story of the kid that was lost in the woods and he came out, but you could tell they took a picture of him. He saw things. He saw, and he came out unscathed. Nothing was on him. He was completely fine, but he was there for a day or so or 2. This is a little boy. That's all I remember.
Very scary.
Crazy.
He knows where the cryptids are. So let's think of this story now on a, dare I say, idealistic level. This story does have a moral, like most good fairy tales. That moral is kindness and goodness are rewarded. All 3 heroines, for the mother herself is a heroine in the story, no matter what Yinny thinks, are rewarded for their goodness. They are kind in the face of danger, hostility, and rudeness. The behavior of others does not change the character of the women.
You bet they don't. What better way to live life than choosing to be kind instead of mean, positive instead of negative? I'm getting poetic here, Sarah. Let's continue.
Other interpretations of the story include the idea that Snow White and Rose Red are representative of the 2 sides of humanity. We're going a bit philosophical here.
I see that.
Snow White is representative of quiet thoughtfulness and introspection, and Rose Red is representative of the perceiving, extroverted part of humanity. This also corresponds with their assigned colors. After all, colors are rarely random in fairy tales. And while white is most easily associated with innocence, we often recognize that in these fairy tales, red is often associated with life and vitality. That the girls love each other and are inseparable is symbolic of the fact that the two facets of humanity should embrace each other, rather than shun or value one over the other. This would then make the dwarf symbolic of the negative aspects of human nature: rage, rudeness, greed, cowardice.
Annoyance.
High blood pressure. These traits, through the dwarf, have already harmed the prince/bear. Can the evil in human nature be overcome by the good? According to the Brothers Grimm, it absolutely can. Additionally, if you look at all of the Christian symbolism in the story, a guardian angel, a dove, a lamb, I definitely think the Brothers Grimm were trying to share the idea that good little children can be a light in a dark and scary world. At the end of the day, Snow White and Rose Red is a story of the innocence of childhood, the sweetness of sisterhood, and that no matter how other people choose to behave, we always have the ability to choose and do good.
That is so nice, Sarah. Thank you so much for telling us this story, even though it has some
odd elements.
Questionable
That's just
elements.
what we're going to have to deal with for every
in
fairy
all
tale
of our
that we
folklore.
cover.
In all of our podcasts, it's just questionableness all the time. All right, my uncivilized toadstools. Let us continue into the modern media.
Yes. While this may not seem that modern, it is still in circulation, it's constantly being reprinted, and it's honestly a wonderful book to own. The Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang was first published in 1889 and features the story of Snow White and Rose Red. This anthology of fairy tales has been reprinted over the decades, with new art added, and is a must-own for any fan of fairy tales and folklore. And if you want even more fairy tale anthologies, Andrew Lang also has a red, yellow, orange, purple, green, pink, brown, olive, and crimson fairy book. I'm sure I'm missing one in there.
Okay, the point is, the Blue Fairy book is the most popular, right?
Yes.
So, and also, I don't have it, so please, that could be my gift for Christmas.
Got it.
There you go. Patricia C. Reed's book, Snow White and Rose Red, is a retelling of the story, set in England while Elizabeth I ruled, and with Elizabethan dialogue, meaning it has words like thou, hast, nay, thee. The story has a pair of changeling princes, arguing sorcerers and scientists, and the border of the fairy kingdom hidden within the forest.
Snow White and Rose Red appear in the DC Comics series Fables, written by Bill Willingham. You know, my husband keeps trying to get me to read that series. Maybe I should finally pick up a copy.
Oh, maybe you should. I'm trying to read Invincible.
Jared loves that one. Jared loves it.
I want to get into it. All right, the 1997 novel In the Shadow of the Bear is a modern retelling of today's fairy tale and takes place in, you guessed it, New York City, with protagonists Rose and Blanche Breyer. All right, Sarah, let's get into this siren call, huh?
All right, we're going to keep it simple this week. Pick up a copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales so that you can join us as we continue covering their tales throughout the podcast. It's weird, it's whimsical, it's great.
And also, it's just going to make you cry because what you think you know about fairy tales is all a lie.
It is a lie. It is a lie.
It's all a lie. Anywho, we'll see you next week for a enchanted episode as well. Or shall I say, superstitious.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Story Sirens. You can follow us on Instagram at Story Sirens Podcast. Want to support us? Send us a cup of Ko-fi by searching ko-fi.com/storysirens. We've got lots of treats for those who become siren seekers. All research materials can be found in the episode summary. Music by Donald Guzzi and artwork by Alexis Torres. Story Sirens is a Feather and Fin production. See you soon.